Welcome to the next part of box plots and how to graph them. In the last mini video above, Mr. Nelson showed you how to do it in your calculator. We're going to show you one more time, and then we're going to give you a couple that you can try and see if you get the same thing that we got. All right, so here we go. Again, what we want is we have some data here. We have 20 data values. This is kind of an important thing to do, is while your data doesn't have to be in order, the calculator is not smart. The calculator doesn't know what numbers you intend to put in or what you didn't. So if you put 650 instead of 65 here, or if you put 8 instead of 82, your calculator is not going to say to you, hey, did you mean to put 8 or did you mean to put 650? It's just going to take the data you give it and it's going to go ahead and run the analysis. So this first part is the most important part when you're using a calculator, is 1, did you put in all 20 values? And 2, did you put them in correctly? And then the rest, the calculator will do for you. Again, we're going to be using the TI-73, which we'll use in class. And if you need one, you can come to the school and check one out with the librarian, Miss Ingram. And we will also have attached to this unit, there is an online calculator that you can use as well. So here we go. Every time I start doing a new thing, I always want to reset my calculator. For those of you who haven't done that, remember reset is second, 0 because that's memory. And then 7 is reset, so you either down arrow or hit 7. All ran, because we're doing everything. So we hit 1 and then we hit 2 to reset. And you'll know you reset when it says ran clear. Now that that's clear, I want to take this and put this list in. So I'm going to go and hit list. And I want L subscript 1 means list 1. And the reason why there's more than one list is because you can look at more than one piece of data at the same time. So Mr. Nelson's putting in that data for me. But you have to put this in, and remember, it's super important that you make sure, 1, when you're done, you see how it says list 1, and in parentheses there's numbers that keep on increasing as Mr. Nelson's putting it in. You're going to make sure when you're done that you have 20 data values. Now he just went to go back down again. See, he stopped here, so we're going to say, oh, it's 21, but notice there's no data values here. If we go up to the last one, it says list 1, 20. I know I have 20 values, so that's a good tip. Secondly, I might want to go back through my list. You can either go straight down, go backwards, or you can go down, and it'll bring you back to the top of the list again. You can do it that way. But you should go through your entire list and make sure your data is right. Because if you make a mistake on any one of these data points, everything you get, basically you've poisoned the well of information. And everything you get from that well is going to be wrong. So you can get one number wrong and it can throw off almost all your data. So once I've done that, now the first thing I'm going to do is remember, how do I do one variable stats? The one variable stats, we're going second, list, which is the stat button. Then I'm going to arrow over to calculate. And one variable, and the reason why it's one variable is these are all either x's or y's. They're not x and y. They're one variable that we're dealing with. Maybe it's test scores. Maybe it's height. Maybe it's shoe size. But it's one variable that we're dealing with. That's why it's one variable stats. Then I hit enter, and boom. I don't care about any of this stuff. I'm going to come down to this stuff, and this says I have 20 pieces of data. Another check to make sure I've done everything right. I have my minimum, my maximum, my quartile 1, medium, and quartile 3. But I can put those in right now, but what we're going to do is, again, this is a reminder of how to do this with a graph. With a graph, I have to turn on the plot. So I second, and then the yellow word plot, I'm going to hit plot. What plot means is I want to put I'm plotting points on a graph. That's why we're plotting. And it says plot 1 off. Notice that there are 4 plots. I could graph up to 4 things at the same time, but right now we're only graphing 1. So I have 1, hit enter. Whatever's highlighted, whatever's in the dark is highlighted. So it hits enter, and now the plot is on. And I down arrow once. And people always want to down arrow again, but if you down arrow again, it puts you to the list. You go back up. Notice that there's no words underneath type. That's because this is still part of the same row. So I just arrow to the right all the way down until I get to the box plot that has the dots on it. That means box plot with outliers. Hit enter, and then it's list 1. That's what I put it in there, and then I'm going to hit graph. Now, I don't see anything on my graph because my data doesn't even start until 40, and then it goes all the way to 99, and this is a 10 by 10 graph, so it's not going to show it. So the way I do it is I'm going to hit zoom. That's the zoom button right there. And then zoom stats. What that means is I want you to take this graph and I want you to zoom the stats all the way to where the data points are. And what it'll do is it'll make the best graph that'll fit on with all the data points that you put in there. So I hit zoom stats and boom. You notice how this is super mushy looking. That's because my data points go from 40 to 99. You can't put 40 to 99 little dashes here, so it kind of makes everything mush together. But that's okay, because when we look at this, well, it gives me an overall shape of my data. See that? It gives me an overall shape of my data, but it doesn't give me the numbers here. But I can fix that by bringing it back up by hitting something called trace. What trace does is that gives you that blinking arrow, and I can go left or right to find the missing data points. So let's start all the way over to the left. It says my minimum is 40. It's also my outlier. We bring that to your attention because what we're saying there is that even though it is an outlier, and we want to bring it to people's attention that this is outside of my regular data, it is still part of my data. I may not like that one of my students scored a 40 on the test, but I can't just say, well, I don't want to count Timmy. His test doesn't count. No, I'm just saying he's an outlier because he never comes to class, but he's still on my class roll, so I have to show that he's my minimum. Now I go up arrow to the ones. That shows me 47. 47 isn't on here, right? That's just if I was graphing. 47 is not my minimum. It's just where my whisker starts. I don't have it listed here because it's not important other than if I was graphing it. And if you were graphing it on a piece of paper, you would know that. And then arrow to the right says Q1, that's quartile 1. It says my quartile 1 is 68. I can get that easily. Go to the right. Medium, or quartile 2. It says my quartile 2 is 77.5. Arrow to the right. Now I got Q3, which is my upper quartile, and that says 84. And then all the way to the right, that says maximum. And again, that gave me my data, but now I also know, do I have an outlier? And the answer is I do, yes. And what is my outlier? And the reason why this is big is because my outlier can be, I can have one outlier, I can have two, I can have multiple outliers. In this case, my outlier was 40. So my minimum is my outlier. Sometimes my maximum is my outlier. But it shows me, and sometimes I have more than one outlier. So I showed you, again, you can rewind this if you need to see how to do this. But again, a really quick recap would be list. You hit list. You put your list in. Then you go second plot, draw on the plot, graph it, trace, and it'll give you all the data points you need. So let's have you try one. So boom, here's some data. This is 31 data points. So if I had to type this in, this is a lot of typing in, right? I would type it in, then I get one variable stats, and if I did one variable stats, it would say, oh, my minimum is 10, my first quartile is 44, my median is 63, my third quartile is 75, my maximum is 86, and do I have an outlier? And in this case, it says no. So apparently, when I graph this, when I hit my plot and I graph this, while this is really stretched, this is not 1.5 times that. So interquartile range means your quartile 3 minus your quartile 1. And anything is considered an outlier if it's 1.5 times larger than your middle 50% of your data. And while this is really long, it's not 1.5 times longer than my middle. So while it is long, I don't have an outlier. So you don't always, this looks like you might, but because my middle 50% isn't 1.5 times longer than my middle 50%, then I don't have an outlier. Over here, it's very obvious you don't have an outlier, but this one didn't show me an outlier. All right, let's try one more. And again, you should know how to do this. If you don't, go back to the beginning of the video, reset your calculator, put your data in. One variable stats will give you your numbers. Turn on your plot. Turn on the outlier plot, and hit trace, and you can go through, and it'll give you the shape of what your data should look like, and it should give you your points. So for instance, if I went to plot, here's my plot. Whoa, this shows me that I have a bunch of outliers in this data. But then I would take my trace, go all the way to the left, and it would say my minimum is 5. So that's at 5, right? It doesn't show me this or this unless I trace. Those are going to be under my outliers. Is there outliers on this? The answer is yes. And look, I have one at 5, there's one at 13, and there's one at 42. And so that's where that trace helps. You can go trace, and you can click, and it shows you what those outliers are. And then I can come over, and 57 won't show up here. It just shows when I trace, because this just shows me where my whisker begins. Basically, 1.5 times longer than this made these 3 points of data outliers. My quartile 1 is right here. If I trace on that, it should show me that it's 72. My median is here. When I trace onto that, I see that it's 82. My upper quartile, or quartile 3, is here. And when I trace on that, I get 87. And my maximum is the furthest piece of data to my right, and that is 100. And so hopefully you can do this. If you have questions, you can always email us. If your calculator's not working, if you need a little more extra help, that's fine. But this is something that is this is an old concept that we're just showing you how to do your calculator. Please go ahead and use the calculator that we have given you on this app or a TI-73 and complete the questions.